When you sign a mortgage, you're probably focused on the big numbers, right? The interest rate, the monthly payment. But what about all that fine print? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on some really surprising, hidden rules in real estate loans. Things uncovered in major court cases that could totally change how you see your own property. Let's dive in. So, let me start with a question that sounds, well, completely crazy. Imagine you take out a loan, you secure it with your house, and you pay it all off, every single cent. You're done. You're free and clear, right? Well, what if I told you that that old paid-off mortgage could actually be used to foreclose on your home because of a totally separate loan you took out years later? Sounds impossible, but believe me, it can happen. The culprit, believe it or not, is this powerful little thing hidden deep in many loan documents. It's called a dragnet clause. This is our first major concept, and honestly, it's a real game changer for understanding just how far a mortgage's power can reach. So what on earth is it? Well, a dragnet clause, sometimes people call it a blanket mortgage, is basically a sentence in your contract that says, hey, this property you're putting up, it doesn't just secure this loan. No, it secures this loan and any other future loans or debts you might ever have with this same exact lender. It literally casts a wide net to drag in all your future financial obligations. To see just how this works in the real world, let's look at a classic case, the Mojica case. It's a perfect example. A couple gets a small loan, secured by a mortgage that has one of these clauses. Step one, done. Then they pay it off completely. Great. But later, they get new, totally separate loans from that same bank. And when they couldn't pay back those new loans, you guessed it, the bank went back in time, reactivated that old paid-off mortgage, and used it to foreclose. And that brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Can a bank actually do that? I mean, is that even legal? Can a security for a loan that you already settled come back to life for brand new debts that didn't even exist when you first signed the papers? What do you think? While the Supreme Court's answer was a clear, powerful yes, the court said that a dragnet clause is a totally valid contract. It creates what they call a continuing security. This means the mortgage doesn't just die when the first loan is paid off. As long as you owe that bank any money that falls under that clause, that original mortgage is still alive and kicking, and it can be used to take the property. But that power isn't absolute. If the dragnet clause is like Superman, well, the courts have also defined its kryptonite. There is a very important limit to the bank's power, a specific situation where this clause suddenly becomes powerless. And the Prudential Bank case gives us that all-important distinction. See, in the Mojica case, the new loans were unsecured. They had no collateral of their own. That's why the dragnet clause worked. But in the Prudential case, the new loans had their own separate security attached to them. Maybe it was a different property or a hold on a savings account, and the court said in that situation, the dragnet clause from that first mortgage does not apply. It fails. The court's thinking here is what they call the reliance on security test, and the idea is really simple. If the bank makes you put up new collateral for a new loan, then it's pretty clear they are relying on that new security, not digging up some old dragnet clause from a previous deal. The court even said this is to prevent the borrower from becoming a prisoner of the bank, where one old mortgage just traps a property forever. Okay, so we've talked about when a bank can foreclose. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about how they have to do it. Let's get specific about the rules of notification. What does the bank actually have to do to let you know your world is about to be turned upside down? This is a question I think a lot of homeowners have probably wondered about. If the worst happens and foreclosure proceedings begin, are they legally required to send you a registered letter, or knock on your door, or give you some kind of personal heads up? Well, the China Bank case gives us a really surprising and very clear answer. Under the law for this kind of foreclosure, the answer is, surprisingly, no. The law only requires two main things: posting a notice in 3 public places and publishing it in a newspaper. That's it. A personal notice to you, the borrower, is actually not required by law. Now, here is the huge exception. Personal notice is only mandatory if you and the bank specifically wrote that requirement into your mortgage contract in the first place. All right, on to our final big idea. We've covered when a mortgage is valid and how a foreclosure works. But what if the actual amount the bank says you owe is just fundamentally wrong? This is where the fairness of an interest rate can become a really powerful defense. So let's look at the Cuico case. The loan contract laid out an interest rate of 18%. Now, you might hear that and think, okay, that's high, but it's not totally insane, right? But here's the catch. It wasn't 18% per year. It was 18% per month. Yeah, when you do the math on that, it comes out to a jaw-dropping 216% per year. That's an amount that would make a debt spiral out of control almost instantly. And the Supreme Court absolutely agreed. They didn't just lower the rate, they struck it down using some incredibly strong language. They called it void for being unconscionable, saying it was against morals and public policy. In other words, it was so ridiculously unfair, the court declared it completely illegal.
And this brings us to a vital point. Legally speaking, a mortgage is just an accessory to the main loan. It can't exist by itself. Its only purpose is to secure the actual debt. So if the amount of that debt is legally wrong, because it's based on a void, illegal interest rate, then the accessory, the mortgage, can't be used. The foreclosure has to stop, dead in its tracks, until the debt is completely recalculated using a correct legal interest rate.
So, after going through these 4 big cases, what have we really learned? Let's put it all together into a kind of essential toolkit. 4 key rules that you absolutely need to remember when you're dealing with real estate loans. Okay, let's break it all down one last time. From the Mojica case, we learn that the dragnet clause is very real and very powerful. From Prudential, we get its weakness. A new loan with its own security escapes the old dragnet. From China Bank, the lesson is clear. If you want personal notice for foreclosure, you better get it in writing in the contract. And finally, from Kuaiko, we learn that a foreclosure can be stopped cold if the interest rate they're using to calculate the debt is illegal and unconscionable. And that really brings us to the final thought. What all these cases show is that the words buried deep inside those loan documents, they have immense power. They can create obligations that last for decades and have consequences we never, ever saw coming. So the real question I want to leave you with is this. You've signed the contracts, but do you really truly know what's in them?